Mark was known for his clumsiness. It was almost as if he had a special talent for turning the most mundane tasks into a series of unfortunate events. He meant well, always wanting to lend a helping hand. His heart was in the right place, and his intentions were always pure. But more often than not, his efforts ended in disaster. Like the time he tried to help in the kitchen and ended up spilling an entire pot of soup. He once tripped while carrying a cake, sending it flying into a surprised guest's face. The guest was covered in frosting, and everyone burst into laughter. Another time he tried to change a light bulb and somehow managed to short-circuit the entire building. The whole neighborhood was plunged into darkness for hours. Mark's friends and family had learned to brace themselves whenever he offered assistance. They loved him dearly but knew that his help often came with a price. "Don't worry, I'll get it," Mark would say with an enthusiastic grin. His optimism was infectious, even if it was sometimes misplaced. But everyone knew that getting it usually meant turning a simple task into a hilarious mishap. Whether it was fixing a leaky faucet or assembling furniture, Mark had a knack for making things more complicated than they needed to be. Despite his clumsiness, Mark's friends and family couldn't help but laugh and appreciate his efforts. His mishaps became the stuff of legends, stories that would be told and retold at family gatherings for years to come. Mark was excited to visit his Uncle Burt. He hadn't seen him in years. Uncle Burt lived in a cozy little cottage on the outskirts of town. Mark remembered spending happy summers there as a kid, playing in the garden and listening to Uncle Burt's stories. As soon as Mark arrived, he was eager to help out around the house. "Mark, just tell me what needs to be done, Uncle Burt."
Well, Mark, let's just take things slow, shall we?
Mark's first opportunity to help came in the kitchen. Uncle Burt was feeling under the weather and asked Mark to make some soup. "Mark, no problem, Uncle Burt, I make the best soup," Mark chirped, already rummaging through the cupboards. He found a recipe for tomato soup but mistook chili powder for paprika. When Uncle Burt tried a spoonful, his eyes watered, and he started to cough.
Mark, I think you accidentally made chili.
Mark, mortified, apologized profusely and quickly grabbed a glass of water for his uncle. Undeterred, Mark decided to try his hand at dusting. He had always seen others do it with such ease and grace, and he thought, how hard could it be? With a determined look on his face, he grabbed a duster and set to work, moving from one piece of furniture to the next. He picked up a delicate antique vase, admiring its intricate details. The vase was a family heirloom, passed down through generations, and Mark couldn't help but marvel at its beauty. He turned it over in his hands, tracing the fine lines and patterns with his fingers. Suddenly his elbow bumped against a shelf, sending the vase crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the room, and Mark's heart sank. He stood frozen, unable to believe what had just happened.
He stared at the shattered porcelain on the floor, his face a mixture of disbelief and resignation. How could I be so clumsy? He thought, feeling a wave of guilt wash over him.
I was just trying to help, Mark stammered, his face turning red with shame. He could feel the weight of his mistake pressing down on him, and he wished he could turn back time and undo his blunder. Later that evening, Mark thought he was being helpful by singing Uncle Burt a lullaby. He remembered how his mother used to sing to him when he couldn't sleep, and he wanted to do the same for his uncle. He tiptoed into his room and began to belt out a song. His voice, though not perfect, was filled with sincerity and warmth. He hoped it would bring comfort to his uncle.
He stared at Mark, bewildered. The sudden burst of song had jolted him awake, and he couldn't quite process what was happening. "Mark," he said, stifling a yawn, "it's 3 in the afternoon." He couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of the situation, appreciating Mark's good intentions despite the timing.
Wanting to cheer up his uncle, Mark decided to order a pizza.
"What toppings do you like, Uncle Burt?" he asked. "Just cheese, please," Uncle Burt replied.
Mark, thinking he'd surprise his uncle, added sweet corn, anchovies, and pineapple for good measure. When the pizza arrived, Uncle Burt just shook his head and chuckled. Mark's attempts to be helpful continued. He tried to draw Uncle Burt a warm bath but accidentally made it freezing cold. He attempted to mow the lawn but ended up trimming the flowers instead. Despite all the mishaps, Uncle Burt couldn't help but appreciate Mark's good intentions. Mark had always been a whirlwind of energy, often leaving a trail of minor disasters in his wake. Yet, his heart was pure, and his intentions were always noble. Uncle Burt had seen many people come and go, but few had the same earnestness and genuine desire to make a difference as Mark did. He realized that Mark's heart was always in the right place, even if his actions didn't always reflect it. It was in the small gestures, the way Mark would go out of his way to help a neighbor, or the way he would always be the first to volunteer for any task, no matter how daunting. These actions spoke volumes about his character. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Uncle Burt patted Mark on the shoulder. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, a perfect backdrop for a heartfelt conversation. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and mutual respect.
"Mark," he said, "I know you mean well, and I appreciate your efforts. You've got a heart of gold, and that's something rare and precious. Don't ever lose that, no matter what. You're a good kid, even if you are a bit accident-prone. It's your spirit and determination that count, and those are qualities that will take you far in life."
Mark smiled, relieved that his uncle understood. It was a moment of validation, a reassurance that despite his flaws, he was valued and appreciated. This understanding gave him a newfound confidence. He knew he wasn't perfect, but he was glad that his clumsiness didn't overshadow his genuine desire to help. He often found himself in awkward situations, but his intentions were always pure. This realization was a turning point for him, and even though Uncle Bert's house was a little worse for wear after Mark's visit, their bond had grown stronger, cemented by laughter, understanding, and a shared appreciation for the absurdity of it all. The mess was a small price to pay for the joy and connection they had found. In the end, it was these moments of chaos and camaraderie that truly defined their relationship, making it all the more special.